Greetings and welcome back. In this video, I want to take a quick look at some of the blending options available in the Layer Styles window. Now, up to this point, we've seen a few blending options that are available straight out of the gate when working with layers. For example, we have access to a blend mode, which can be applied globally to an entire layer. Now, since we're on a white background, most of these will have virtually no effect on our document, other than making our stick figure seem to disappear depending on the settings. So I won't really mess with these, and we did talk about them in a previous video. We also have access to opacity, which makes our little stick figure more see-through. It increases his see-throughness as we drag that down to the left. And we have the fill as well. Now, fill is, at this moment, going to look like it's doing the same thing. And it's not really until you start playing with layer styles or your various blending options that the fills setting is going to become a lot more important. So let's go ahead and jump down to our little FX button at the very bottom. Make sure that the stick figure is the active layer, so select that if you haven't. Or make a stick figure layer of your own and draw the most amazing stick figure ever. Make sure it's cooler than mine, as hard as I know that will be. And then come down to your effects button and click on blending options. Now there are several options available in here, and we'll just kind of go along, and if I decide I want to split the video in half, then we'll kind of declare sort of a universal part 1 and part 2 as we go. Now, starting at the very top, the general blending options we've already seen and we just talked about. We have access to the blend mode and the opacity. These are exactly the same values that you see here at the top of the layers panel. So it does the exact same thing. As a matter of fact, as we slide one, you'll see that the opacity is in fact changing to keep up. They are one and the same. Next we have fill opacity. Once again, same thing. It's just exactly like the fill opacity that's sitting out here. Underneath this we have our channels. We can control which channels are blending and which ones are not. Now by default, all three of our channels, red, green, and blue, are blending equally. If we turn off red, for instance, the result of the red channel not being blended is shown here, and so we can systematically go through and kill off any channel that we don't want to blend. And since this is a blue stick figure, turning off blue isn't really going to have a whole lot of effect. Next we have knockout. Now knockout's kind of an interesting case, because really to show this, I need to have some other layers in my document. So let's do this. I'm going to go to File and jump down to Place. Now I'm going to place a few images into my document from the sample pictures of the Windows 7 installation. If you're not using Windows 7, feel free to use any pictures that you like. Download some off the internet, grab some off your digital camera. It doesn't matter. Or you can just make a few. You can just make a few extra scribbles. But if you have an image, if you actually have a real picture of something, some sort of a bitmap, it will make this demonstration a little easier to understand, I think. So let's grab something with a lot of contrast from one image to the next. We'll go with the chrysanthemum, and we'll place that. Now I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt, and we'll scale this up nice and big so it covers up our entire stick figure. I don't care if it bleeds over the sides, that's fine. And then we'll press Enter. Let's place in another one, so go back to File and choose Place once more. And something that really contrasts against that would be the jellyfish, I think. So much cool coloring in there. So now again, Alt and Shift and drag out from the corner. That's just giving us a nice uniform scale. And when we're happy, we'll press Enter. Now I'm going to take my stick figure and I'm going to drag its layer to the very top of our layer stack. I'm also going to let's reverse the order of the chrysanthemum and the jellyfish, just for the time being. So just for the video, it's a lot more apparent what's actually going on, because we can see that blue really jumping out from the red chrysanthemum. Okay, so now let's go back over to the stick figure. What knockout allows you to do is to control whether or not the opacity of your layer, the transparency around the edges, so we have some pixels that are opaque and some that are transparent. We can control how that punches through the layers beneath. And you have some options here. You have no knockout, you have shallow, and you have deep. I will have to make a few changes to our layer arrangement to show all of these off. However, if we leave this at the default of none, and I take my fill opacity and start to crank it down, if you take a look at our document, you'll notice that it looks like our little stick figure is just kind of going transparent and fading away. If I set this to shallow and start to pull it down, take a look at what actually happened here. We have punched out all the way to the background, and I can prove it to you. If we go down to the background layer, and let's grab some obnoxious shade of green for our paintbrush, and I start painting. And I'm going to start painting in the upper corner so you can see what's going on. So painting, painting, painting. Come down. Oh, look, we're painting back behind our little guy. And we're punching all the way down to that background layer. You can see the effect that that has. So again, there's what that punch through is doing. Or knockout. I don't want to call it punch through. It's a knockout. And in this case, shallow and deep seem to be working exactly the same way. To really show off the difference between shallow and deep, I've got to take my stick figure and my chrysanthemum, and I need to put those into a group. So we'll take the stick figure, chrysanthemum, we'll select them both by holding the shift key and clicking on each layer. So if I just have stick figure selected, hold shift, click on chrysanthemum, and drag them both down into a group like so. Now, something interesting just happened there. You'll notice now we no longer see the background. We, in fact, see the jellyfish layer. So let's see what's happening here. I'm going to go back to the stick figure, double-click to open up its layer style window. Now, check it out. Our knockout settings are set to shallow. What shallow is going to do is punch down to the next layer that is outside the layers group. So, because we originally, when we set to none, we just fade away to nothing as soon as our opacity goes down. Also, just as a note, you don't necessarily have to deal with just fill opacity here. Even adjusting a blend mode such that you can see through the layer will have an effect as well. So if I set him to overlay and then switch to shallow, you'll see that we are now punching down to that jellyfish as well. It's just so much clearer to see what's going on if you leave this at normal and play with the fill opacity. I just wanted to point that out. So at shallow, we're punching down to the next layer that exists outside our group. If we switch to deep, we go all the way to the background. It's important to know the difference because if we brought in any other layers, so for instance, if I start off by selecting the chrysanthemum layer and go back to File, Place, and let's bring in the lighthouse, and I'll do the same thing I did before. We'll hit Alt and Shift and scale that up and press Enter. Notice that we're knocked out straight through the lighthouse layer, like it's not even there. However, if I put the lighthouse layer on top of the jellyfish layer outside the group, and make sure that my stick figure settings are indeed at shallow and not deep, we're now punching down to the lighthouse. Because what's going on here? Well, the stick figure is knocking out the chrysanthemum layer, and the first thing it finds outside the group is the lighthouse. If instead I put the lighthouse inside that group, then we knock through the lighthouse, we knock through the chrysanthemum layer, and then we find the jellyfish layer underneath. So that's all you really need to remember, is that shallow finds the first layer that sits outside the group, deep goes all the way to the background. So that's a quick look at our blending options down through knockout. So what I'm going to do is stop the video here, and then we'll pick up on the other half of these advanced blending options in the next video. Thanks a lot.